Hi, I'm Sloedi Spaghetti, and in this video, we invite you to join us on a bike ride from Aguilas to Lorca in the Murcia region in the southeast of Spain.
And hi, I'm Vera, and I'm really excited to discover what we will see on the way. So, let's go!
Yep, if you didn't catch us mentioning what cycling route this was, that's because it wasn't one. At least not officially. It was simply the route our navigation software suggested to avoid traffic, and as you can see, it did a decent job. Not a car in sight, just us and a dusty, weathered path.
So let's reveal the route. One that started very differently than it ended. After leaving a campsite just outside Aguilas, we said goodbye to the sea and headed north into the hills. First crossing a mountain pass and then continuing all the way up to Lorca, the next major town.
Aguilas lies in one of the driest regions in Europe, officially classified as having a desert climate. So we were surprised to discover that water, or more precisely irrigation, would become the theme of the day. Not its absence, but its abundance. Just goes to show, every journey tells a different story, often drawing your attention to something unexpected.
For a short stretch, we followed the Vereda del Cocon, a historic rover's path, or Via Pecuaria, once used by shepherds roaming the Iberian Peninsula. Cocon is the name of a small hamlet nearby.
But instead of spotting houses, we were surrounded by a sea of white netting and plastic sheeting, covering plantations as far as the eye could see.
In this arid landscape, only a sophisticated irrigation system could sustain agriculture on such a scale. The fruits were hidden, but we'd get some clues further down the road.
Official cycle routes often guide you through postcard-perfect scenery. But when you stray from the well-trodden path, you never quite know what you'll find. It might not always be beautiful, but it's always interesting. Passing through these fields, we saw how water is pumped directly into the ground to reduce evaporation. A far more hands-on geography lesson than anything we remember from school.
Here and there, rocky patches or steep terrain had spared small islands of wild vegetation. Trees and shrubs offering shade and a breath of nature amidst the plastic sea.
Our navigation prompted us to turn right, but there was no road. So we looped back, adding a 5-kilometer detour that led us to a relic of the past, the disused Aguilas Almendricos railway line. The larger connection between Murcia and Aguilas is currently being rebuilt, with service expected to resume in 2026 or 2027. But here, the old line was quietly fading under a blanket of wildflowers. That said, we'd soon see clear signs that construction is indeed underway.
Back to agriculture, relentless and revealing. Riding parallel to the track, we passed what looked like lettuce fields, being harvested by teams of migrant workers, bending under the sun, wrapping the produce in plastic, loading it onto conveyor belts and into trailers. A mobile assembly line in the middle of a field. It was eye-opening to see this brief but telling stage of a food supply chain that stretches all the way to supermarket shelves across Europe.
Leaving the railway behind, we rejoined our original route and soon touched on the Andalusian border, and with it, the steepest climb of the day.
summit, we looked back towards the sea for one last glimpse. Up here, we were surrounded by massive reservoirs, full to the brim with rainwater from the storms of the past winter. That water, once a flood risk, now stored ready to be pumped down to the farms below. The contrast was striking. Dark blue water in concrete basins, like huge swimming pools nestled in the otherwise bone-dry hills.
The landscape changed again on the other side of the mountain. The agriculture looked different, a patchwork of fields with far less plastic. Likely the result of a different microclimate. Mountain terrain often shapes growing conditions in unexpected ways. Still dry though, very dry. But with the view no longer obstructed, we got a good look at the remarkable diversity of crops being cultivated.
Next came a long canal, another key element of the region's irrigation system. For us, it was a welcome break. The path was flat, the wind was at our backs, and after the steep ascent earlier, it felt like we were flying.
It's quite something to witness, fruit and vegetables growing in such abundance, right in the middle of what's essentially a desert. We saw oranges, lemons, peaches, lettuce, aubergines, tomatoes, even almond trees growing along the roadside. We cracked open one of the nuts just to take a look. Further along, fields of broccoli were in full bloom. The artichokes hadn't flowered yet, but they were close. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Lorca, most gardens were filled with cactuses, growing stubbornly in dust and stone.
We spotted the massive hilltop fortress above Lorca long before we reached the town. And with that, we figured our journey was done. Time to wrap up the video and find a place to rest. But Lorca had a surprise in store. A vibrant town centre, full of historic charm, and one very unusual, very artistic shop. So if you're curious, stick around after our goodbye. We've got an extra treat for you before the sun goes down.
So that was a very intense and exciting ride. We rode 56 kilometers and there was so much to see and discover. What was your favorite part? Have you ever cycled this route before? Please share your thoughts and experience in the comments below.
And if you've enjoyed this video just as much as we've enjoyed this ride, don't forget to smash that like button. And if you would like to see more inspirational videos for cycling routes, don't forget to subscribe.
We look forward to seeing you in the next one. In the meantime, we're going to check out the town and see where we can stay the night. So until then, thanks for watching.
Happy cycling.
Bye.
Adios. Before setting out to explore the town, we got distracted by the large crowd that had begun to gather at a church entrance. What we were witnessing was the start of a Via Crucis, or Way of the Cross, a ritual procession commemorating the final hours of Jesus' life. It was early April and the lead up to Easter, or Semana Santa, one of the most important observances in the Catholic calendar.
This tradition involves 14 symbolic stations, each representing a specific moment on Jesus' journey from condemnation to crucifixion. At each stop, a short prayer or reflection is read aloud, typically from scripture or devotional texts, before the group moves on to the next location.
The mood was quietly reverent, as prayers were being spoken outside the church in solemn, rhythmic Spanish, though we couldn't understand all the words. The group then set off on foot toward the next station, winding through the streets on their way to the final stop, a hilltop chapel or Calvario, symbolizing the place of crucifixion.
Even this short glimpse into the tradition was deeply atmospheric, offering a moment of insight into how enduring and embodied these religious practices still are in everyday life, especially here in southern Spain.
We then turned our attention to another hallmark of Spanish culture, the colorful and vibrant evening atmosphere of pedestrian zones. Historic buildings painted in warm tones framed the scene, while the streets buzzed with life. Shops invited closer inspection, and the open doors of bars gave a glimpse inside, revealing beautifully crafted wooden beams, traditional tiles, and artwork hanging on the walls.
But behind one particularly ornate facade, we stepped into something completely unexpected. A near silent, minimalist hallway led us into a curving underground space, surprisingly airy for being below street level. Spread across 2 floors, this modern interior felt more like a museum than a shop. Raw concrete walls, natural stone floors, and soft lighting created a serene, almost meditative atmosphere, a world apart from the bustling street outside.
Displayed on staggered platforms was a wide selection of handmade crafts, from woven carpets to jewelry and locally made crockery. Naturally, we couldn't resist, and Vera left with a lovely new pair of earrings.
Lorca's past is written into its buildings, and, in some places, into their absence. Located in the region of Murcia and nestled between the coastal sierras and the Guadalquivir River Valley, the town has long been shaped by its strategic position. From Roman times to Moorish rule and the Christian Reconquista, Lorca has been both a crossroads and a stronghold. Today it's home to just under 100,000 people. And while its economy is still closely tied to agriculture, there's a growing emphasis on tourism, heritage conservation, and cultural revival.
But despite its historic beauty, Lorca is also a city marked by tragedy. In May 2011, it was struck by a devastating earthquake, the most destructive Spain had seen in decades. Though relatively moderate in magnitude, the quake's shallow depth brought extensive damage. Buildings collapsed, facades crumbled, and lives were lost. As we explored the city, the aftermath was still visible. Once grand houses now hollowed out, held upright only by steel reinforcements, their interiors reduced to rubble.
It gave the otherwise tranquil streets a haunting atmosphere, especially as we reached the Plaza de España, the heart of Lorca's old town. The square was quiet, as if holding its breath. Only the distant chatter of children and the whirling calls of swifts echoed above us, dancing through the sky with the familiar 333. It was a moment suspended in time.
Up on the hill, the silhouette of Lorca's imposing medieval fortress, the Fortaleza del Sol, or Fortress of the Sun, reminded us of the town's resilience. Next to it stood the remains of a church destroyed in the quake, now carefully rebuilt, blending in parts of the remains with modern architecture. Bathed in the soft glow of dusk, both structures seemed to look down on the town protectively, as if watching over its recovery.
Our walk back to our B&B led us away from the historic center and into the maze of whitewashed alleyways. Here the homes were more makeshift, boxy apartments tucked irregularly with terraces adorned with potted plants, laundry and the occasional barking dog. It felt raw and real, a side of Lorca far removed from postcard views, but equally part of the town's character.
As night fell over Lorca, we felt we'd seen many sides of the city. Its elegance, its resilience, and its everyday life. But this was just a pause, not the end.
The next day would take us north, out of the town and into a very different kind of landscape, one that left us genuinely speechless. We won't spoil the surprise just yet, but let's just say, if you've ever wondered what a breathtaking encounter with nature looks like, you want to stick around for that.